Do you use less EQ if the heads are really, really new?
I use as little EQ on the drums as I have to. And a lot of times I will not use any. I usually don't EQ when I'm recording. I try not to.
Just straight off the mic?
I try to get it off the mic straight in there.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, which leaves you many, many more options for later. Also, when you're adding EQ, you're adding some phasing to it, and it can create its own problems later.
Do you ever use specialty mics like speakers wired backwards?
I've done that, fooled around with that. I did an album just recently in Virginia, and I used an old speaker as the microphone directly on the outside of the bass drum.
What was it, an NS10 woofer that you used?
No, I think it was like an old EV 10-inch that was in a 10-inch speaker that was in a little cabinet. I guess had been used some kind of a monitor or something, and the guy had just turned it around and rewired it. I put it in, it sounded like...
Gave you a lot of low, huh?
That's right. Now, if a guy, with that kind of low, you have to be very careful with it. If a song is very busy, you can't do that.
Yeah.
You can't do it. If it's open, or if it's got open and very airy and funkish, you can do that. Or I would do that in a special mix for a dance club. But I wouldn't want to do it for a radio, because then it would just eat up so much energy. You're going to have a much softer sounding thing, and the compression from the radio station would be absurd.
You ever cover the kick drum with a blanket or something
I
like that?
have done that. Yep, I've done it. And I've also liked, one of my favorite things is if I'm doing a power rock band or something, I like to take the bass drum, I'll put a mic in front of that, then I'll put another bass drum in front of that bass drum, and then I will take the blanket and seal the area so I can get as much energy transferred to that bass drum in front of the bass drum, and then I'll mic the front head of that guy. And that'll be just
So it's that
beautiful.
sympathetic thing.
Sympathetic 20 hertz that is just brutal.
Do you recommend a drummer remove the front head of his drum for recording?
No, I actually like the front head to have the hole in it.
Yeah? How big a hole?
Well, you'll buy it with a hole. It'll come with a hole like this.
About 6 inches?
Yeah, that you can. The idea of the hole is to be able to fit the mic through it. I've worked with drummers that said they wanted to have their front head on without a microphone inside of it, and I've just always ended up replacing that bass drum. And then inadvertently the drummer will say, "See, I told you it was going to sound great." I say, you were right.
What do you do about jazz drummers that have both the heads on there and it's a real tight 18-incher?
Oh, I just, that's a horse of a different color. Drums are, even though they're drums, they're the same instrument. They're used in different manners. When you're doing rock and roll, that bass drum has to be there defining the bass drum part. Just like the snare drum has to be there on 2 and 4. And you don't want a guy going, back, back. You can't have that. But whereas in jazz, the guy's going to go, boom, boom. So the foot and everything is a dynamic thing. So it's actually doing, along with keeping a semblance of time signature, it's doing another job too. It's adding accents and points, and it's more of a percussion thing as opposed to what we consider a drum set when we're doing rock and roll, whereas it's all about the drums.
And how do you handle that?
Well, I handle it by many times I'll mic the batter, or just a little bit off to the side of the batter behind the kit, and then I'll mic the front of the drums. And in a jazz situation, I would never use that 6-foot microphone on the front, because you don't need boom. You don't need that. Matter of fact, you don't want it, because the bass player is going to be doing a lot of stuff. So you have to be very careful. The bottom end is a very important part, and it can become a really big problem if you're not very careful with it.